Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Target Smart podcast brought to you by Target Smart. I'm your host, Albert Morales. This week, we welcome Benjy Messner, CEO, founder of New River Strategies. Benjy has worked with Beto for America, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, the Justin Trudeau campaign, and numerous Fortune 100 companies to inform their operations with data. He's a 2018 winner of the American Association of Political Consultants 40 Under 40 Award and a 2017 winner of Campaigns and Elections Rising Star Award. Uh, Benjy, first of all, thank you for coming on to our podcast here at Target Smart. We know this is a very busy time of the cycle for you, especially, who is knee deep in all sorts of work related to the election. I like to break the ice with our guests by starting with the very basics. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and perhaps maybe your first campaign gig.
Yeah, thanks, Albert, and thanks for having me. It's definitely a busy time of year, really getting my money's worth out of the Target Smart Analytics file these days, so appreciate that. I'm a DC native, born and raised here in Washington, D.C. There aren't that many of us, so it's always nice to come across others. My first campaign, very, very first campaign, was for the DC Council in 2006. It was a Democratic primary, and our candidate spent the most money out of the entire field by a factor of 2, and we came in 7th out of 9. So that was a very valuable lesson in how to run a good local grassroots race, and certainly have never forgotten that. Then I went on to work in Virginia for a number of years for Mark Warner and Creed Eads, and in Missouri for Claire McCaskill, and have been consulting and working with Target Smart for the past decade or so.
Great. So, how about your current role as CEO of New River Strategies? What led you here, and can you tell us a little bit about what you and your team at New River does?
Yeah, absolutely. So New River, we've been around for about 4.5 years. We were founded on January 6th, 2020. So I like to claim January 6th before the traders got to it. What we really try to do is help people use data and analytics and technology to move people to action, whatever action they need. Maybe that's getting someone to cast a vote, write a letter to a member, sometimes purchase a product. All of it is really focused on that question of using data to move people. And, that's, of course, where we work closely with you all at Target Smart, the analytics file and all of your enhancements, in order to find those people and figure out what we know about them. So we do a ton of political work, mostly on the soft side, and then some corporate work as well, focused on helping people engage with constituents and sort of tell their story.
Great. So, Benjy, shifting gears here a little bit, we went from donor fatigue, call it cold feet, whatever, last week to record-breaking fundraising hauls. But that's national. In your experience, working across various campaigns over the years, is this something other campaigns, down ballot campaigns, can also capitalize, specifically on the momentum, or do you see this as something that's just unique to, say, a presidential race?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, obviously, Vice President Harris, taking the lead here has gotten people really enthused. And I, as a Democrat, I'm really enthused to see the numbers she's been putting up. But, other groups like the DLCC, the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, they've been reporting record hauls as well. And I think, it seems like the Harris campaign really understands that, it's not just whether she wins, it's a whole party. So my hope is that these numbers we've seen so far can continue for everyone. And, I will say, I've certainly heard from friends on candidate campaigns and at hard side committees that things have been really turning around for them too. So it seems like people are really energized, and I think we can expect the increase in contributions and volunteers to continue for a while. We're also only 100 days out. I think today we're 103 or 102 days out or something as we record this. So some of this is also, I think, just natural as people are starting to tune in and, realizing what's at stake.
Interesting. So sticking with Democratic digital infrastructure, do you think Democrats are better prepared for this moment than, say, we were in 2020 or 2016? Have we caught up with the Republicans? I remember reading a lot of articles over the course of the last two cycles that just were, they weren't very fair, I don't think, but many of them alleged that we weren't exactly at par with Republicans. Do you feel as though we surpassed them, or we neck and neck? What's your take?
It's so funny you bring that up. I think there are two points there. One is, I think the news media has been unbelievably hard on President Biden his whole term. I don't know if you or any of the listeners are a fan of the New York Times pitch bot, but I think that guy's doing the Lord's work out there, calling out the Times and other papers for their hypocrisy. I bring that up to say, I think, the performance over the past week or 6, 7, 5 days, whatever it's been, has been so incredible that, even the most biased of Times reporters can't ignore that. The other thing I would say, in my experience, having lived through the fat times and the lean times, is, it's such a strange coincidence that whichever party wins the election turns out to have the best tech, the best data, whatever it is. I think the work we do in data and analytics is very, very valuable and it matters, but it's also not like any voter is like, oh, well, I had a better donation experience with the Democrats, so I'm voting for Kamala. That's ridiculous. I guess I would say I'm not sure we ever lost to the Republicans. Donald Trump didn't win in 2016 because of problems with the TargetSmart file, right? That's ridiculous. So, I think because we had such a competitive primary in 2019 and 2020, a lot of these tools, got a beating then and really were built to last, and we're now reaping the benefit there. Act Blue, I think, does a tremendous job with their product of being ready for these money bombs in a way that Win Red famously does not. I think we're seeing that our party's continued focus on these tools and on this kind of innovation really pays off.
Speaking of tools, Benjy, what's been the most fascinating? I mean, you're an authority on the digital space within the party. A lot of people look up to you, so you've seen products come and go. What's that one tool that you've worked with over the years that you think has really been a game changer, from people running for city council all the way up to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
Well, first, Albert, you flatter me. I'll have to remember to send you your check at the end of the month for those nice words. So thank you. I think there are a ton of good tools. The thing that I think people often forget is, a tool doesn't make up for actually doing the work of campaigning. I was just this past week at a retreat for a statewide campaign that's going to be mostly paid media because we have to reach so many voters. This is a big state. Our universes are huge. Field is important, but it just can't be the path to victory. Whereas I think, for a city council or a state legislative campaign, your path to victory is to knock every door in your district 5 times, and to meet every single voter and to be their best friend and to not overcomplicate it. So I don't know that I can pick a winning or a losing tool, but I would say anything that makes it easier for people to actually have conversations with voters is really important. I think we often get so caught up in micro-targeting and tools and data integration that we lose sight of the fact that delivering a positive message to voters about why they should vote for us is really the only thing that matters, and everything else is just in support of that. But having said all that, I worked at what is now Bonterra, for 3.5 years. So I'm just going to pick the safe option and say Van.
Yeah. So along those lines, Benjy, taking a step back again here, we've come a long way since the clipboards, and I remember making Xerox copies as these maps go.
Oh God,
books
and
that we'd use
Microsoft
to canvas
trips and cutting turf by hand.
Yeah.
Lord.
Have you? Do you think has that efficiency from that we've gotten now from digital tools made us better? Have you seen a spike in turnout, or can you point to anything that says that we're any better for all these incredible tools that are out there than we were, say, 20 years ago?
Well, sure. I mean, I think I would actually reframe that a little bit. I think it's less, are we better? And it's more, have we prevented ourselves from becoming worse? And of course, you can't prove a counterfactual, so that's difficult. But what I mean by that is, if we hadn't modernized, if we hadn't started meeting voters where they are on, whatever goofball platform people are using these days, we wouldn't have a chance at winning. So I guess I would say I view it as more like we're just having to keep up with where voters are going. I remember when I first started working in politics, we could count on like a 20% contact rate on the phones. We were calling people's landlines, and 1 out of every 5 of those calls would result in a conversation with a voter. And now, if I see a 0.5% rate, a 40th of that, we're overjoyed. I think these tools are really just tracking the broader movements in society. And, that's also why I always hesitate to view any tool as sort of a silver bullet, right? It's just more, we know voters are engaging with campaigns in 10 different ways. We have to make sure that we're meeting them there too.
Interesting. So, Benjy, one thing I didn't mention when I introduced you was that you're a guest lecturer at Columbia, or a lecturer at Columbia University. What's the first thing you tell a poli-sci major about digital and the role it plays in the modern day campaign? After you've told them to pick another major, of course.
Well, luckily, I only teach grad students. So these are people who have already made bad decisions in their lives to go into this field, But no, in all seriousness, I've really enjoyed the political analytics program at Columbia School of Professional Studies. These are all really smart students, who have, some of them were poli-sci majors, some of them weren't. They all want to, be a part of our field and do the work we're doing. And many of them are, I think, the next generation of this, which is not to say that grad school is the only way you can get into this. I think there are a million ways, but these students are very impressive. And, I think one thing we've talked about a lot, in my course was, really this idea of not overcomplicating things. I think, again, the tendency to micro-target and over-segment and, be talking to 4,000 voters is very strong. But, in our country, theoretically, the person with the most votes is supposed to win, and you can't micro-target your way to a majority. So, a thing we talk about a lot is how can you use these digital platforms to reach people at scale? What can you do to ensure that you're talking to as many people as you can and not as few people as you can? And that's been a really interesting conversation. I'll also say, as someone who is a bit of a curmudgeon, maybe, I'm not on TikTok. I've had the opportunity to learn from these students about, things that are going on these platforms that, I really otherwise wouldn't know about. And that's been very interesting.
It's funny you mentioned TikTok. So last night at the dinner table, our daughter, who's 14, was walking us through, giving us an education on everything that's happening with the vice president on TikTok and how she basically owns the platform now.
Yeah.
So, she's 4 years away from being able to vote, but boy, if she could, she would. She's very excited, and all of her friends feel the same way, I think.
And this is how we get young people engaged for the long term, right? I can't say TikTok is my cup of tea, but that doesn't matter. What matters is getting your daughter and her friends and their friends ready to vote. One, that just makes our jobs easier, right? Those are fewer turnout targets for us in the future. So I appreciate that. But two, just from a civic participation angle, it's so good to hear that even if these people are not engaging, these young people are not engaging in a quote unquote traditional way, they're still super invested and finding their own way to it.
Yeah. Well, Benjy, you've been a great guest. I want to thank you for being flexible with your time. I know, again, this is a very busy time of the cycle for everyone, especially you. You got a lot of demands on your time. I want to bring you back before the election. I just saw on the news a short while ago that according to Act Blue, over $200 million has been raised online since Sunday. So I'd love to have a separate conversation on how you see online money competing against these oligarchs on the right.
Yeah,
if you have any thoughts on
it's the only hope we have.
leave.
The only hope we have,
Yep.
to let the grassroots fight, these huge Republican donors, the Elon Musks of the world. I think the 1% has made their preference for Donald Trump very clear. And, it's reassuring to see that despite Citizens United and all of these unfavorable Supreme Court decisions, the American people have still been very clear about their desire to run this country. And I find that very heartening. So, obviously we still have 100 days. We'll see what happens. But, I guess I would say on the fundamentals, I'd much rather be in our position than theirs. We have a great record. We have grassroots momentum on our side. And fingers crossed we can translate that into a huge set of victories this fall.
You are right. I'd much rather be us than them. Thanks again, Benjy, and to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple, Spotify, all up and down that roster. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks for having me.